from Tyrone Township.
Very good, Chair Kleinman. We do have quorum.
Great, thank you. So next up, we're going to do the approval of the consent agenda, but I have a modification to the consent agenda, which is that I want to make a modification to tonight's agenda. So I believe what I do now is I'm going to make a motion to remove tonight's agenda from the consent agenda because I want to amend tonight's agenda. Okay, is there a motion to remove the agenda from the consent agenda? All right, I see Commissioner Boland and seconded from Commissioner Brovin. All those in favor, physically raise your hands. All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. So now we have an amended consent agenda. So now I need a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Chair Kleinman, if you could say what the amendment is, though, I don't think you voiced that.
Oh, I do. Do we approve the consent?
We'll approve the. Oh, I'm sorry. So
I was going to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The whole procedures thing has never been my strong suit. Okay, so I need a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Commissioner Brovin and seconded from Balderrama. Okay, all those in favor, physically raise your hands. All those opposed? Okay. So consent agenda passes as amended. Now we're going to talk about tonight's agenda. I would like to remove the discussion of City Council transportation issues from the agenda, both because Commissioner Briggs or Councilmember Briggs is not here tonight, and I think she was the one who asked this question, and I think she'd want to be here for the discussion. Also, we've had a couple of late additions to the agenda, and so it's going to be a full night, and I would like to have more breathing room for this conversation, and I would like Councilmember Briggs to be here. So, can I make a motion? I never made a motion as a chair. I'm going to move to amend the agenda to remove City Council transportation issues from tonight's agenda. So I guess to postpone it, and we'll probably talk about it next month. Can I get a second? Commissioner Boland. All those in favor, physically raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay. Agenda passes as amended, agenda passes as amended. Thank you, everyone. Now we are going to move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. Raymond, are you doing the timer or am I doing the timer? I can do the timer. It looks like you're trying to still figure out a lot of things. I'll do the timer.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, thank you.
Not at all. To speak at public comment, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 960-2232-8200. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to raise your hand, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. And that's the instructions. It sounds like we do have some callers tonight.
We do indeed. And I also see that CTN has joined us. So hopefully we are good to go. So maybe we were successful after all. One other thing I do want to note, in last month's meeting, there was a typo on the call-in. So my apologies to any of the callers who may have tried last month. That has since been corrected. It was correct in about 4 places, but it was wrong in 1 place. So unfortunately, if people were using the wrong number, they would have had difficulty dialing in. But it looks like we have success tonight because we have several callers. So the first caller with phone number ending in 340, I have allowed you to talk. Go ahead and unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Looks like you're still muted. What are the instructions for unmuting?
I think it's *6 on Zoom will unmute you.
Okay.
Caller with 340, if you can unmute, the floor is yours.
Sounds like they may be having some difficulties. Why don't we move on to the next caller and we'll come back to 340 to try and make sure we get everyone in.
Yes, so now we will move on to caller with the last 3 digits, 588. I have allowed you to talk. Go ahead and unmute yourself. The floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Peter Hauk, a resident on Yeoman Court. I'm calling again tonight about the plan for resurfacing and adding crosswalks to Sioux Church Road. As you've heard me say before, I'm concerned that the reckless driving on Sioux Church and the frequent misuse of the center turn lane might lead to crashes with pedestrians in the new crosswalks as they are currently designed. But I think there are ways to make this road better. Included in your reading list this month was an email that I sent proposing an alternative layout for the crosswalk at Churchill. If we move it to the west side of Churchill, then adding a refuge island seems much more viable without causing undue inconvenience during left turns. In this example, if we don't get the design right, we are going to be locked in with facilities that aren't as effective and safe as they could be, and will be very difficult for us to change later on. In February, I started a Facebook group for nearby residents and other users of Sioux Church as a forum for discussion about this upcoming project. We already have 48 members, including a new one who just joined today. Discussion in that group has affirmed the need for some action to curtail bad driving behaviors and has also brought up some other really good alternative ideas. One idea is moving the crosswalks further from the intersections so the islands can be added without inhibiting left turns. Another proposal is combining the bike lanes into a single bidirectional track, which would take up less room, thereby leaving width that can be used for refuge islands. Another idea is adding islands away from the intersections. They wouldn't be refuge islands, but they would make passing in the center lane much less attractive to impatient drivers. Like the proposal I shared with you by email, these ideas all work better if we design for them now instead of trying to work them in later. I've summarized these ideas in an updated presentation document that I will email to you, and hopefully each of you should get it. Now, I don't know which of these ideas would be feasible or which would be best, but it's obvious to me that there are options out there to make our road much safer for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. It's also obvious to me that we have many people in my neighborhood who are engaged and who are eager for these improvements. So I'd like to urge this team to keep Sioux Church top of mind when looking for opportunities to achieve the ambitious infrastructure goals that we have set for ourselves in our new transportation plan. Please, let's get these features into the design sooner rather than later. This is the biggest change to Sioux Church Road in the 20+ years that I've lived nearby. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to bring this road up to the modern standards for multimodal transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfectly 3 minutes. Who do we have? Thanks so much. Who do we have next?
All right, next we have, we will go back to caller ending in 340. I have allowed you to talk. Go ahead and unmute yourself and the floor is yours. Oh, caller 340 just dropped. So we will move on to caller ending in 404. I've allowed you to talk. Go ahead and unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Hello. Hi there.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Great. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk tonight. My name is Colby Gadd, and I'm a resident of Ann Arbor. I live on Williamsburg Road. And I've been tracking on the conversations that I've heard in these commission meetings the last couple of months about traffic calming, lots of requests for traffic calming around the city, lots of studies being done to find out how to calm down traffic. And I even remember Commissioner Hess mentioning that it would take 6 years with current funding to resolve all of the current requests for traffic calming because of volume of requests and the cost of fulfilling all those requests. Something that I've wondered about in connection with that is if there's been any consideration of filtered permeability solutions. I know lots of communities find it effective to enter boxes in the road that allow pedestrians and cyclists to speed through a short stretch of road that would prohibit cars from using that same stretch of road. So super effective at traffic calming road in a lot of ways, and can be a pretty minor convenience for residents to only be able to use one side of the road. But lots of the roads that we talk about with traffic calming measures are pretty short roads to begin with, so the residents might find it convenient to create a very calm road for a very short drive around to access their driveways. And yeah, I've just wondered if that's a solution that's been considered, because it can be very cheap and easy to put in and reversible if it turns into a disaster. And it could solve some of the problems that we're talking about over the last couple of months about the volume of requests for this sort. So thanks for your time and consideration and for all of your work.
Thank you. We mostly don't reply to public comments, but that is a solution that's in the new transportation plan. That's one of the things that's presented as an option, and it's something I keep pestering Raymond about. So moving on to the next caller.
All right, caller last number's 534. You have been permitted to speak. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Good evening. My name is Tom Stahlberg. I'm calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor. You've got a lot on your agenda tonight. I won't talk about all of it. One of the things that's on there is the Lower Town Mobility Study that went on for a couple of years. I followed that closely and participated from start to finish, and would really like to compliment the consultants that worked on that and our staff planner, Luke Liu. I think they did an excellent job in both engaging with the public and running their meetings, and the detailed field work that they did. I've started to read it. It's pretty thick, a lot packed in there. So, but I know they provided some options and not just single solutions as well, from what I'm noting in that final report. So I just want to compliment the team that did the work on this. In terms of a couple other things, well, I'll just mention the train station. As somebody who took Amtrak back and forth to Chicago a lot pre-COVID, and I have family there still, the station is wonderfully located where it's at, with the rest of town moving rapidly towards where the station is. This is my part of town. I walk near there very frequently, almost daily. There's a lot of people who can walk to that train or take a short bit of transit to get there in the current location. We have massive development coming right on the Broadway Bridge across from the tracks there, with 100 condos coming and a lot of public amenities and a hotel, and additionally some additional connections and pathways that are going to be there, in addition to pavilion and ice skating rink and additional livery. There are condos that are being that were already approved on Main Street, maybe 20 of them right near there. We have the tree line trail connecting with the border trail right at that location. And with the new storm tunnel that was built underneath, it included a pedestrian cyclist tunnel that's heavily used now. We have 721 North Main Street, which is a city-owned property that's going to be developed in some way, probably as park space with a little bit of housing on part of it. There's the old community center that's there. What I'm saying is that downtown is growing in that direction of the Depot Street train station, and a refurbished, expanded, revitalized station there would be a wonderful thing to have. So I hope we can move towards that solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more callers?
We do. We have one last caller with their hand raised, phone number ending in 194. I have allowed you to speak. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. This is Rita Mitchell calling, and I just wanted to ask a question, which is on your agenda. I cannot read the consent agenda items, so it would be interesting to understand what those are. But my reason for calling tonight is to thank the Commission and the City for placing the discussion of the potential for improvement at our Ann Arbor Amtrak station within the public's eye by including in your agenda tonight a recent letter that was sent from the City to the Federal Rail Administration. I'm concerned that the letter describes some significant work that was done outside the view of the public to make some vaguely described changes in the project that was discontinued by the Federal Railroad Administration in August of 2021, 6 months ago. The city's message to the FRA suggests changes to markedly reduce the train station parking, but hints at future phases that are undefined. So I will ask, could those be based on a ghost framework of the parking structure that was that the FRA described as excessive? One of the points made by the FRA when it discontinued the project was that concerns raised by the community were persistently ignored by the project team. Fortunately, in the most recent message, the project team agreed that the public engagement component is dated. Yes, the last public discussion on the project was in October of 2017, and at that time, 60% of written comments that were submitted at meetings that supported the use of the Depot Street location for the Amtrak station for many of the reasons that you just heard. If the project is to move forward, this is a great time to daylight it. 11 years after its initiation, the original project is outdated. It's a fossil remnant tied to auto use and storage based on excessive parking that was included in a $171 million plan. COVID-19 and remote working had changed the transportation scene. Adjustments are needed that are based on current patterns and projections of transportation that may change the way we do things compared to the 2011 approach. Under the potential changes that are proposed by the project team to reduce the size of the station or the project, it's not really easy to tell, the Depot Street location really may fit the needs of the community and visitors. Depot Street definitely has greater opportunities to serve transit-oriented development, via commerce and housing that the location that is in Fuller Park. I look forward to for all of us getting creative and working toward the future to integrate the big picture of public transportation that supports the community in the time of our climate crisis. We don't have the financial budget or the carbon emission budget to construct a cement structure to store cars. The future of transportation will be different. Electric vehicles of all types should be on the move constantly with people in them, not stored in structures or even in personal garages. We need a plan that will support people and the planet and us here in Ann Arbor. And I look forward to working with you all on it. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Any more callers?
That is the last caller with their hand up, and I think everyone else has spoken already, so I think we are good.
Great. Thanks everyone who called in tonight. So now we are going to move on to business. And we've got our bylaws amendments. So included in the packet are some suggested changes to the Transportation Commission bylaws, which reflect past changes, and also some minor changes that were discussed at the last meeting. So we're going to be taking a vote on these bylaw changes tonight, but I'm going to give Raymond a chance to walk us through it first.
Yeah, just as a quick reminder, we discussed these last month. By and large, most of the amendments proposed as part of the bylaws are really just to align past action that the Transportation Commission took back in 2018 and 2019 that really just slightly changed the composition of the Transportation Commission. Then based on some of the feedback from last month, we also added some language that would allow for alternates for the Planning Commission and the Commission on Disability Issues, as well as specifically notifying that or mentioning that designees are permissible for the city administrator, the transportation manager, and chief of police. So that's actually already in practice. The city administrator Nick Hutchinson is here, Lieutenant Sherba is here for chief of police. and I just stuck myself in there as well as transportation manager. So by and large, we try to reflect the suggestions from last month to this month, and we are looking for a recommendation from the Transportation Commission tonight. This would have to go to City Council for final adoption. So, your action tonight would be a recommendation to City Council.
Great. Are there any questions, concerns, or thoughts about these bylaw changes? We did a pretty thorough discussion at the last meeting. So I'm going to make sure everyone has time to just take a quick glance if you haven't yet and you want to ask a question. All right, I'm not seeing any hands. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the changes. Oh no, I just lost everything. Approve the changes to the Transportation Commission bylaws as presented and forward them on to City Council for adoption. I see Commissioner Boland, and can I get a second? Commissioner Lee. And all those in favor, physically raise your hands. All those opposed? And any abstentions? I forgot about abstentions before. Okay, motion passes. Thanks, everyone. Next up, we have the Enforcement Transparency Resolution. So as I've mentioned before, the chair of the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, Dr. Lisa Jackson, reached out to me and to the chair of the Human Rights Commission on a couple of resolutions related to transportation and police enforcement. And so, this I thought was of relevance to the commission because it affects mobility as well as equity. And so you all have in your packets the proposed resolution that I thought we could take some time to discuss. And then I am asking for action on this item so that we would pass this resolution and it would be forwarded on to council along with the ICPOC resolution version of the resolution and the Human Rights Commission version, basically asking for transparency and access to traffic stop data. And my understanding is that this is largely data that the Ann Arbor Police Department already collects. It's just not made available to ICPOC or other outside groups. I know Councilmember Briggs had hoped to ask Lieutenant Sherba if he had anything he wanted to add about any of this as our representative from the police department. So, not to put you on the spot, you don't have to, but I know that she wanted to make sure there was time for you to share any thoughts.
Thank you, Chair Kleiman. Just a couple thoughts. One, the police department is absolutely interested in increasing transparency, and this is a way to do that for sure. So that's certainly something we are in favor of. The one, we'll call it a speed bump that we're going to run into is, as you stated, the department does already collect probably 50 to 60% of the data that was on that list for the proposal. There are a few items that we don't currently do, and getting those items in a state, if you want to call it that, where we can collect that data proposes challenges, because where we collect the data is a database that we don't own. That's Oakland County. Clemis runs this database, and we've been with them since about 2007. And because we are not Oakland County, and because usually the requests that we make are kind of one-offs from what the rest of everyone wants to do, they don't typically want to do these things. So, while absolutely the data that we have, I would be in favor of sharing. I think there might be some concerns, or not concerns, but might be some challenges in getting those additional items in there. So what if, even if we being the commission passes this resolution that we want to have these things, I'm not sure that we're going to get everything that we're asking for, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. And it's helpful to have that context, because I know there are a lot of challenges around gathering this data and making it available. So it's helpful to know a bit more specifically what those are. One detail that I wanted to share about these resolutions is that the resolved language is the same in ICPOC's version and HRC's version and our version, and that was intentional so that we're all asking for the same things. So I think even though it sounds like it might not be possible to get all of the things that are requested in the draft resolution, I would ask us to pass it as written. It doesn't hurt to ask, basically. And then just a little more detail about these resolutions. The whereases have been, like, we've tailored the whereases to each commission. So we talk about transportation related whereases in this version. There are more human rights related ones for the HRC and so on. So, but ideally we would keep the resolve clauses the same so that it's sort of a united message to council from all three commissions, and there's not like confusion about what people are asking for. Are there any questions for me or for Lieutenant Sherba about any of this? Yeah, Commissioner Boland.
This is, I guess, a question for Lieutenant Sherba. How locked in are we to that Oakland County database? Would it be a huge ordeal to develop our own database?
That's a good question. CLEMIS is an acronym for Courts and Law Enforcement Management Information System. So it would probably best equate it to like Microsoft, and then there's different modules within CLEMIS that do different things. The one we use is called Activity Log that captures that data. To create our own, that would be not my area of expertise and what that would really entail. But I mean, certainly we can ask where it was like the old computer thing. You remember what says like what you see is what you get, when it turned out to be really what you get is what you get. It might be that what we get is what we get when it's all said and done. We may not be able to get any more out of CLEMIS than what we currently have.
So it sounds like that might end up being a larger discussion about like license, down the line, the systems that were the AAPD is licensing, and the kinds of purchasing that we do for that software, which is like beyond us tonight, but I think definitely worth asking.
Right, and Commissioner Boland, I don't know if there's a vendor out there that has such a thing that could be customized for that, to capture everything that's being asked for, or if that's something we'd have to create in-house, or how what that even look like.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Other questions or comments? All right. Then I am going to ask for a motion to approve the traffic stop transparency resolution and forward on to City Council for consideration. Commissioner Hadamaki, and I'll take a second from Commissioner Brovin. All those in favor, physically raise your hands. All those opposed? And any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Thanks, everyone. Next up, we are going to talk about the Vision Zero Implementation Committee. So included in our packet tonight is a proposal from staff to form a Vision Zero Implementation Committee under the auspices of the Transportation Commission. This is something we've talked about, and we weren't sure what form exactly it would take in the past. So I think Raymond is now going to give us a sense of what the shape will be.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Chair Kleinman. So, yeah, as we've mentioned before, and as I think all of you are aware, we are currently in the midst of developing a Vision Zero implementation plan. Part of that is a sort of steering committee to help that process along. And we call it the Vision Zero Implementation Committee. The first meeting was February 23rd, so just a few weeks ago. We had Commissioner Boland and Commissioner Hadamaki there representing the Transportation Commission, so we thank them for participating at that. And one of the things that we talked about with the committee itself was whether or not, or what staff suggested is that this be housed under the Transportation Commission. Part of the reason we think that's important is it establishes clear lines of communication, that it is a committee of the Transportation Commission, and it's seamless, because what we don't really want is to have kind of competing recommendations from different groups, and really have a kind of clear direction that channels through the right thing. And then quite frankly, the other aspect behind this too is there's long been discussion of creating a Vision Zero committee in general. Just this was part of the Pedestrian Safety Task Force from several years ago. And so what we've done is there were several other ad hoc committees. There was an alt committee and some others. And so what we've done is we've kind of mushed them all together into this Vision Zero implementation committee. And we think it's a good strategy that addresses the recommendations for the Pedestrian Safety Task Force, as well as kind of reporting up to the Transportation Commission through those lines of communication. So included in the packet is a charter. It's based off of slides that were shared with the committee at their February 23rd meeting. So the language is fairly consistent, and it's modeled in structure to, I think, something that late Commissioner Diane Felt put together, Linda Diane Felt, for, I think it was the micromobility subcommittee or committee. So that's how we put it together. And so again, we're just hopeful that the Transportation Commission agrees with having this as a formal committee. The one thing that I will note here, and this is probably a to be determined, is what the lifespan of that committee will be. Right now, it's really focused on helping inform the implementation plan process, which includes the implementation plan, the major streets traffic calming, and pedestrian safety outreach. When that consulting contract is done, there's probably a conversation that needs to be had with the committee itself about whether that committee continues to live on in some perpetuity to help continue guide Vision Zero. So we can probably have that latter discussion at a later date, but I think for now, having the Transportation Commission, if you all are interested in kind of formally putting this under, nesting it within the Transportation Commission is what we're looking for tonight.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I will just note, because we've got some newer folks on the commission, that the creation of a Vision Zero committee is actually recommended in the Moving Together Towards Vision Zero transportation plan. So this is sort of like, it was they recommended that we create this committee sort of in addition to the existing commission. So I'm curious about every other month until late summer, early fall, because at this point we're talking, that's like 2-3 meetings. Is that enough?
Yeah, no, the work of the committee will continue probably until early next calendar year. To be honest with you, I think, the initial deliverables for quick build strategies, those are the things we're working on immediately that will kind of hopefully, be in the ground by this summer. But then we will move on into the major streets traffic calming and some of those other aspects of the scope. So there's a lot of work to be done. What we try to do is strike that balance, especially for good volunteers such as yourself, not to overwhelm you and engage you in an appropriate way so that, it's not too much work on your end, but we're engaging you just enough to help guide the process. So that's the intent.
Given that, I wonder if it might, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the meetings are scheduled for February, April, and then June, July, August. So in the summer, they are meeting every month. But the first couple of meetings are set off by 2 months.
Okay. I wonder if we might just want to make the language in terms of duration more flexible, both in terms of frequency of meetings and how long this is going to go till. It sounds like if we already know that it's going to probably go into early next year, we should at least say that in this version of the committee charge. I remember my first experience with something like this was the micromobility committee, which did not have an end date. It just sort of had an end product, and it ended up that the end date wasn't until 3 years later. With this one, I think it will be faster than that, but I'm okay with sort of having the conclusion be the product rather than setting a date. I don't know how Commissioners Boland and Hatamaki feel. You're the ones who are actually on this committee, whether that sounds okay to you.
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. I don't think setting a date is I think it's better to have the goal of what the end product is rather than, and I thought that was going to be the case, but
I mean, I'm realizing looking at this, we just kind of have to delete the late summer, early fall from the duration, and that everything else in there already does that. So yeah, Commissioner Boland.
Yeah, I mean, the late summer is the duration of the contract with the consultants. Okay. We should maybe unlink that from the duration of the committee.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because there was the possibility that this committee would exist in perpetuity, once we have a clearer sense of how this implementation is going. But I think, at minimum, delinking it from the consulting contract makes sense. Other comments, questions? All right, then I am going to suggest we make a motion to, let me find my exact words that I'm supposed to be saying, to establish the Vision Zero Implementation Committee as a committee of the Transportation Commission and approve the charter as amended. So just removing the end dates. So do I have a motion to do that? Commissioner Brovin, and I see a second from Hatamaki. All those in favor, physically raise your hand. All those opposed? Any abstentions? You're doing so much business tonight, everyone. All right. Motion passes. I didn't say that. And now we're going to move on to some information and discussion, starting with street resurfacing and related projects with Dave Dykman from the engineering department.
Thank you, Chair Molly. Good evening. My name is Dave Dykman. I'm one of the project engineering managers in engineering. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will come through. Raven, it looks like I'm disabled from participant screen sharing.
I just promoted you, Dave, to co-host, so that should enable you now to present.
Yeah, let's try this again. Apologize for the delay. There we go.
Very good. It's up and running. Thank you.
Can everyone see that? Okay. Thank you again. I'm here to present on the upcoming 2022 street resurfacing improvements plan for this coming construction season. And I thank you for the opportunity tonight. For some of you, this parts of this presentation may look familiar. It's what I've been running with for the past couple of years. So for others who are new to the commission, I hope you do learn some information from it. Why is not my screen? There we go. Well, a little bit of background. Resurfacing objectives are twofold, essentially. They're to return the pavement to a good or very good condition and provide a smooth surface for users, and also to enhance the functionality and safety for the motorized and active transportation users. Depicted here is an example of some work we did 3 years ago on Stone School Road, between Eisenhower Parkway and I-94, where we essentially took this surface down to almost gravel, and then we replaced that existing pavement, and we added what we call sloped curb along the shoulders to enhance the structural stability of those shoulders, and we added bike lanes along that corridor. Some of the core elements of resurfacing are we identify the work using the pavement asset management data that we collect on a semi-annual basis. We just finished collection of that data this past fall. So we rate all the streets throughout the city every other year. And that's a PACER rating, we call it. It's a 10-point scale, with 1 being the worst conditions and 10 being the streets in excellent or the best condition. Streets are programmed, or the work is programmed in the city's capital improvement plan. Some of the work may be either structural, which we consider restorative or rehabilitative work, and other may be non-structural, which is preservation type work. We're looking to just extend the life of pavements that are already in fair to good condition. The majority of the work is contained within the existing footprint of the road. It involves minimal data collection, very little design as well, and typically there's no right-of-way acquisition or easements required for this work. Typical treatments, as I mentioned, are preservation or non-structural. So these are roads that are considered in again, good to fair condition. Restorative, which are roads that are in fair to poor condition, and then rehabilitation roads, which is also structural, are those roads that are considered to be failed or in very poor condition. So those are streets that are typically rated 1 and 2 on the PACER rating scale. Preservation treatments are typically rated anywhere from between 5 and 6. Restoration treatments are generally 4, 5, 3, 4, and 5. There's also some preservation work that we do, including crack sealing and streets that are rated a 7. So as part of the resurfacing work, we look for opportunities that are identified in the transportation plan. We look for drainage and stormwater management opportunities, and we also look for opportunities to make improvements to facilities along these corridors to bring them in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Depicted here is an example of some sidewalk restoration, or actually new sidewalk work. We actually constructed a bump out at this location on Granger Avenue in 2020. So this was considered both a safety improvement. It shortened the crosswalks, but it also it added the mid-block crossing to that street at this location. Typical projects that the city uses to address resurfacing are we typically can't contract out an annual street resurfacing project. Currently, that is out for bid, with bids due back here at the end of the month. We also do an annual street preventative maintenance project. That runs on a fiscal year basis. So we currently have the 2022 fiscal year project that's underway, and that will continue and pick up here probably sometime in late April and continue through the end of June. And then we'll be contracting out or bidding out a new project that should start sometime after July 1st of this year. And that'll extend all the way through June 30th of 2023. And then we also have other standalone utility and resurfacing type projects that are bid separately. This year's 2022 street resurfacing project focuses on what we call Area 7 of the city. So we've divided the city into essentially 8 areas with equal road mileage of local streets in each of those areas. Last year, our focus area was down here in the southeast part of the city in Area 4. This year, we're going to be here more on the west side of the city, Area 7. This depicts the majority of the work that's planned for the resurfacing project this year. Those streets that are highlighted red on the map here. It includes about 20 local streets where we're doing rehabilitation type work. So we'll be taking the asphalt pavement completely off those streets down to base, making improvements or necessary corrections to the aggregate or gravel base beneath that pavement, and then repaving those streets. We also have some preservation work planned for this project on 11 streets. So that'll be more what we call a thin mill and fill. So we'll just be removing the upper portion of the asphalt pavement and replacing it. We also have 3 asphalt paths within the city that are essentially outside of this area. One's located along Liberty. We have another along Eisenhower Parkway, and another down along State Street south of Eisenhower Parkway. And those will be rehabilitation type projects where we'll remove or pulverize that existing pavement and then place a new asphalt pavement over top of that pulverized material. And then we'll be converting 2 asphalt paths to concrete sidewalk. One thing I didn't mention here that we do often do as part of street resurfacing work is we work in conjunction with the traffic calming program. And so as part of that, we'll do the installation work of traffic calming devices that have been approved. So this year there's 2 projects that have been approved on Longman and Fairview. That's one project. And then another on, it escapes me. Maybe Raymond, you could help me.
North side.
No, I can't. North side. Thank you. Thank you. Another on north side. Sorry about that. As I mentioned, there's also 2 street preventative maintenance projects that will be occurring this construction season. The one in 2022 is already underway, and that'll pick up, like I mentioned, in April. Those projects involve crack sealing, patching of the streets, which both of those activities are in preparation for placing what we call a Cape Seal surface treatment. That Cape Seal treatment involves placing a chip seal, which is depicted down here in the lower right of the screen, followed by a second course treatment placed over top of that chip seal called microsurfacing. The city's been doing that probably now for actively for about the last 4 years. We have an active program, probably back 2 decades ago, and budget cuts kind of ended that program, but we've picked it up as part of our pavement asset management tool, one of our tools in our toolkit. So this year we've got preservation work plan for 20 major streets and 60 local streets. And we're actually presently determining the crack sealing locations, but those will occur both on major and local streets all throughout the city as well. More information can be found on all the road construction plan at this link here. It actually has a interactive map that you can click on and zoom in and look at all the various planned projects for this coming construction season, all the various locations. In terms of the major street project locations that are planned for this year, those include Broadway Street, Earhart Road, Geddes Avenue, Huron Parkway and Tubingen Parkway, Platte Road, South Church Road, and South State Street. I've highlighted 2 projects here that I'm currently managing, and I'm going to speak to you a little bit more about what's planned for those 2 locations. If there's interest in any of these other projects, certainly inform Commissioner Hess and Commissioner Hutchinson, and perhaps there could be a presentation done on any other of these individual projects if there is that interest. In terms of Geddes Ave, this project extends from Observatory Street up here at the top of the screen down to Highland. It involves pavement rehabilitation, so we'll be completely removing the existing asphalt pavement surface and replacing that to provide a smooth surface and a longer lasting life of that roadway. There'll be segments of concrete curb and gutter along the roadway that will be removed and replaced, as well as the vast majority of any drainage structure or curb drain inlets along that corridor. There's also some stormwater management proposed as a part of this up here between, I guess, Walnut and Linden Streets. We're going to be installing some oversized pipe and weir structures to slow the release of stormwater into the Adams Creek Basin, which this system is a part of that. In addition, there's some accessibility upgrades. So there's some steps or concrete stairs within the public right-of-way. One set of those is down here at this end near Onondaga, and there's another at Oxford, which is down in this locale. The ones at Onondaga will be removed and replaced with new ADA compliant ramps and sidewalk. The ones at Onondaga will be reconstructed to be made ADA compliant, but then we will also be installing a ramps and sidewalk system for accessibility there as well for disabled pedestrians to use. In addition, we'll be updating street lighting along the corridor at the existing mid-block and mid-block and intersection crosswalks. Those are located here at I think this is Walnut, Linden. There's a mid-block crossing up here between Ridgeway and the entrance to the Arboretum. So those will involve ADA upgrades at those locations, as well as additional street lighting enhancements. And then we'll be installing a new crossing at Harvard Place, together with street lighting at that locale. Lastly, we will be installing a bump out on the, this is the southeast quadrant of the Observatory and Getty's intersection, that will facilitate a shorter crossing along Observatory and allow for some reconfiguration of that south leg of the Observatory to add parking along the east side. That'll involve the elimination of the right turn lane that's presently on that leg of the roadway there at that intersection. The next locale is Huron Parkway and Tübingen Parkway. Scope of this project is very similar to that on Getty's. We'll be, again, removing the entirety of the asphalt pavement surface down to gravel base, making gravel base improvements, and then repaving that surface and replacing it with a new asphalt surface. Again, there will be some accessibility upgrades to existing crosswalk ramps and street lighting along the corridor. Those primarily will be at the intersection of Traverwood and Huron Parkway, and then up here at Lancashire and Tübingen. In addition, we're considering a 3 to 2 lane conversion along this corridor. It presently has 1 lane in each direction with a center left turn lane down the middle. The consideration is to eliminate the center turn lane and add bike lanes in each direction along this corridor. And then on Tübingen, here to the very west end of the project, we will be reducing the width of the roadway. We have an extremely wide roadway between Lancashire and Traver, and planning to reduce that roadway width so it still will accommodate bike lanes, but then we'll be extending the sidewalks from the south up to Traver, so there'll be new sidewalks placed on both sides of that segment within the roadway as well. And then new crosswalks added to the Tübingen and Traver intersection, as well as some new street lighting and street lighting upgrades at that locale. And here's a depiction of what's proposed, or at least under consideration right now. We'll be undertaking a public engagement process to solicit feedback about this proposed change. But this shows what's existing out there with the 3-lane section, the center turn lane down the center of the roadway, and a conversion from that to the 2-lane roadway with bike lanes along each side. These lanes would be 10-foot lanes, similar that we have the same configuration proposed on Getty's Ave as well. Getty's Ave currently has 11-foot lanes, proposing to narrow them down to 20. And with that, I'm open for any questions people may have.
Great, thanks so much. If you could end the screen share, it's easier for me to see folks raising their hands.
Get back to.
Great, thanks. If you could just use the raise hand function, anyone who has questions, it's easier when we've got a stack. I have questions, but I usually let everyone else go first. No other questions? All right, okay, yes, Commissioner Hadamaki.
Thanks. first to comment that I really like the proposed reconfiguration of Huron Parkway to add bike lanes and reduce the lane width. I think that would be great. Do you have, for the areas 1 through 8, do you have a near-term idea of what area will be next year and the year after, maybe? Is it really just a round robin, or, just in terms of answering questions that I get, from people, when is our area going to be up with 8 areas? It could be, I don't know if it's next year or 8 years from now. Can you comment on that at all?
Sure. So presently, our plan is to work in area 3 next year. And then we would go back to area 7 again in 2024. And then area 4 in 2025. And we're in the process of actually updating that plan to look at years further out beyond that.
All right, I'm going to start my questions. So I noticed that you mentioned there are a couple of places where you're making a conversion from asphalt to concrete for the sidewalks. And I'm curious about the rationale for that and what the usage of those are. Because I know when they're treated as multi-use paths, I think asphalt is generally more pleasant on a bike than concrete sidewalks. So I'm curious about how that decision was made.
So those were locations where the existing asphalt paths were very narrow. They're actually acting as essentially asphalt sidewalks. The majority where those are located, there's already the concrete sidewalk present at either side of those. So when staff looked at it, it felt it made better sense to incorporate those and make them sidewalks versus asphalt paths. One of those locations is at the very east end of Oak Brook Drive. They're just east of Main Street. We improved the paths to the west of Main Street back in 2020, but we didn't have the opportunity because of funding to do this stretch. So that's one of the locations. And we have a similar situation on Eisenhower Parkway where it's essentially acting as an asphalt sidewalk again. There's a short piece between 2 pieces of existing concrete sidewalk. So we felt it just made better sense to convert it to a concrete sidewalk versus a path, keeping it asphalt.
Are there like price or convenience differentials in terms of one over the other?
That's something we'll look at because we do take bids for both. So we have asphalt paths pay items in our contract as well as sidewalk pricing as well. And there may be an opportunity to actually pull this out of the resurfacing project and do as part of the sidewalk program because that pricing may come in more favorable than the bids that we receive through the resurfacing project. So
okay. Commissioner Hutchinson.
I just wanted to add to that too. The other advantage of replacing those asphalt sidewalks with concrete is the concrete is much easier to maintain in the long run and will last longer. We have a lot of asphalt paths that are in very poor condition because they're very difficult to maintain. So,
got it. See, that's helpful. I was curious about that kind of reasoning. So another thing, I'm really happy to hear that as a part of one of these projects, there's a reduction of width happening. I think there are a lot of places around town where our roads are probably wider than we need them to be, especially if we want to be reducing driver speeds. And we actually got a public comment this week about, I think it was Virginia, which is on the agenda for this year in terms of a resurfacing project, sort of pointing out that there's a section that's quite wide where the potholes are basically serving as traffic calming and asking about whether a narrowing might be a possibility there. And knowing that it's happening elsewhere, I'm curious how that consideration might be made for some of the other streets, especially the neighborhood streets on this list.
Well, typically, like I mentioned, through resurfacing, we're confined to working within the footprint of the road, just because it's cost prohibitive to remove the entirety of the concrete and narrow the street. We certainly understand that there may be some areas where that opportunity presents itself, and it makes sense. But it is a costly endeavor to try to do that. certainly there's street, I did actually receive an email about that segment of Virginia as well. And we looked at that, and it may be more perceptive because the width of that street is it's essentially a foot wider than where the beyond where we're planning to work this year. So.
Okay, thanks.
It does meet, it does meet our current width standards for a local street.
Okay. I wonder whether maybe on the list should be looking at those width standards, if that's something that we're seeing in other places. But that's obviously not for the resurfacing project. My last question is about, so I'm also like all for bike lanes on Huron Parkway, but I'm curious about the possibility of vertical elements. And maybe that's more a question for Raymond, but paint feels like the bare minimum. And so anytime we're talking about adding lanes, I want to think about ways we can be protecting them.
Yeah, and Dave has worked pretty closely with one of the transportation engineers on the project. So typically whenever a vertical element is included, you need to have a shy distance, right? So that, when people are biking, they don't feel, that they're going to hit their handlebars on it. So, based on Dave's description, I think there probably isn't enough width to put in. You would need the buffer as well as the vertical elements within the buffer to still maintain that shy distance from those vertical elements. So I think it's just a function of that center turn lane. Dave, I'm going to speculate here, was probably 10 feet wide. And so we just kind of split the baby in two. We cut it in half, put those 5 feet on each side against the curb, and those are the bike lanes. But there isn't that much more room to spare beyond that. Is that a fair guess, Dave?
Yes, that's correct. There just isn't the width along that corridor to facilitate putting in a physical element.
Okay, thanks. That's all of my questions. Any other ones? All right. Then it sounds like we're ready to move on. Thanks so much for that presentation. I always like seeing what improvements we're going to get each year. So moving on to the AAATA long range plan, Matt Carpenter and Forrest Yang from the RIDE, as well as Yuval Greenspan, who is a consultant, are going to give us an update on the transit long range plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Forrest Yang. I'm the Deputy CEO of Planning Innovation at the RIDE. So with me today, Yuval Greenspan, Ben Guji from Left Turn, Right Turn, the consulting firm working with us on this project. Of course, Matt is here too. As you remember, we were here last fall, discussed the 4 prime scenarios. Thank you for your feedback back then. And of course, thanks to all the community members who provide feedback. So since then, we incorporate all the feedback and now develop the draft recommendations. So tonight, basically, we just want to give you a quick overview of those recommendations and get your feedback. So I'm going to turn that to Yuval for tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Forrest. How is my audio?
Great. Sound good.
And my slides are on the screen now. I'm just going to pin Zoom so that all right, good, so that I can see you folks if someone raises their hand. So again, thanks for having me today. My name is Yuval Greenspan. I'm the principal with Left Turn, Right Turn. We're the consulting firm that's been brought on by the RIDE to develop the long-range transit plan for the greater Ann Arbor Ypsilanti area. So really excited to be here, talk to you folks again about the RIDE 2045 project, and specifically the draft plan that we've developed based on extensive community input. So we started the project over a year ago and come a long way. Today, we're going to start by refreshing you about the planning process. Then we'll go over what we heard from the public when we shared our ideas with all of you in the fall. And then finally, we'll get into the details of the draft plan itself. And that's where we'll spend the majority of the 15 minutes. We want to hear your thoughts. So ultimately, we'll rely on the feedback of the public, customers, staff, elected officials, and all the stakeholders we're meeting with to finalize our plan for the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti area. So the project itself considers the transit network, including our bus routes and their frequency, new and better types of transit, new types of services, infrastructure, technology, and vehicles. And it's worth noting for all of you that we do have a project website embedded at theride.org, where you can learn more about the work that we've done to date. We've shared various reports through there, including the What We Heard report most recently, with the results of all that feedback from our last round of engagement, which included, of course, this commission. So the draft plan that we're going to be sharing today has been developed with a few specific goals in mind. And as we talked about last time, the goals very much mirror many of the municipal goals that have been set. And so our intention is to design a transit system that increases social equity by improving access to jobs, education, and housing, to help the environment and reduce air pollution, and to support existing and attract new businesses. And these goals were established based on what we heard from the community, stakeholders, our board, as well as customers. And the goals have been central to guiding how decisions have been made and the outcomes that we hope to achieve. The development of the Ride 2445 has taken place over 4 phases. So the first phase was guidance, where we developed the goals and methodology to guide decisions along the way. The next phase was analysis, where we looked at how the ride currently operates and how the community and transit is expected to change in terms of demographics, built form, technology over the next 25 years. In the third phase, which Forrest alluded to, we created potential scenarios based on different levels of funding. And we took 4 of those scenarios to the public and stakeholders last fall for input. And now we're in the last phase of the project. We've narrowed in on a single draft plan for transit in the area based on all that feedback. And alongside that, developed an achievable roadmap that lays out the steps over the next 25 years to build that future transit system and work towards meeting those goals. And we are excited to share that with you today and collect your feedback. So let's take just a brief moment to share what we heard from the previous engagements that guide us now. I will note that the version of the deck that was shared with you in advance had additional slides, which you're welcome to look at. But for today, just in the interest of keeping things short, we've consolidated down to 1 slide. So we came to stakeholders in the fall, and we're excited with the engagement that we had. We actually reached almost 1,400 people, I should say, in the community. And so that the resounding response that we heard at meetings and through our survey that we did was a desire not just for small improvements to the same system, but for a deeply transformational change. And you can see the stat there of 72% of survey respondents telling us they prefer scenario 4. If you remember, scenario 4 was by and large the most aggressive, transformation-focused scenario that we put forward to the public and to stakeholders. We also heard a broad desire for convenience, reliability, and dependability. And in the draft plan, we built on the ideas that resonated last time, including an extensive high-frequency network, better off-peak service, faster travel times using BRT or bus rapid transit, priority, and express routes. These improvements do have a cost and substantial cost. But one of the things that we heard last time is that most of the people were willing to pay for the investments if the benefits to the community are clear. And so through our work and through our upcoming engagement, one of our objectives is really to lay out the benefits that are reachable for the community. All right, so let's turn our attention and look at the details of the plan itself. So, we started with the feedback that we received last fall and built from there. As I mentioned, the transformational scenario is the clear preference. So we used that as a basis for our work. To help manage costs, we made some small reductions in the total service hours that we had in that scenario and replaced some of the dedicated bus lanes that we had there with other transit priority features to help contain capital costs. We also optimized the network to minimize overall travel times. And for the service that we plan to build, we are prioritizing areas with lower access to housing, education, employment, and healthcare to align with the goals that we've talked about. So this network map shows how we imagine the ride could look in 2045. So this, in essence, summarizes our draft plan. And all of the routes have been selected to optimize travel times, which ensures that areas with low access to opportunities have access to high frequency transit. We have 2 full-scale bus rapid transit lines shown in that dark red, and they form the backbone of our system. They will be a combination of both full bus rapid transit with fully dedicated segregated lanes and BRT Light, which has other transit priority features to help it move quickly through traffic. But together, these two red lines, these 2 BRT lines, create strong east-west and north-south connections that we can build from. Other main routes are served by priority and express services, and they're shown in dark blue, which have transit priority features and fewer stops to make trips faster. We have an extensive high-frequency network shown in light blue that stretches across the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti area, creating better, faster, and reliable connections. And waiting and transferring across the service will be improved, especially at our busiest locations where we're introducing upgrades and, in some cases, new transit hubs, shown in those yellow dots on the map. So some of the other features of the plan that we want to talk about and introduce are summarized on this slide. So first, we want to talk about off-peak service. It's something that we heard a lot about through our engagement. Improving off-peak service will help people who rely on transit for all their transportation and need it most. And this includes essential and lower wage workers, women, students, and seniors. We've built accessibility into this plan at every level, including our vehicles, bus stops, transit hubs, fare payment information systems. It's important to note that as the whole system is transformed, we're able to ensure better integration and coordinated planning between all of our service, which includes integration of fixed route services with A-Ride. We're planning to modernize our fare collection and trip planning systems. And there will also be external factors beyond our control that we are aware of or that we recognize. And that's why we're planning to expand partnerships with external stakeholders like municipalities, the Regional Transportation Authority, the RTA, the universities, and community groups. Some of these collaborations can help us with first and last mile solutions, getting to and from the bus. Every stop and station may require a different solution, whether it means on-demand services, bike sharing, scooter sharing, better sidewalks, snow clearing stops. But together, these will make it easier for everyone to use our improved services. So happy to talk about any of these in more detail after. How we connect to the larger region, to the expanded region surrounding our service is also critical to our long-term success. So while the particulars of those connections depend on partnerships, and they also depend, quite frankly, on outside funding, we have identified some key elements to work toward. On the map, on the map, you can see the light green shows general areas where we can add more park and ride lots connected to our service area, with express buses shown in dark blue connecting customers in. These will help to draw riders in from a broader area by providing regional connections all around our regular service area. So I know that was a whirlwind summary, but really what we wanted to get to is also talk to you a little bit about how this is going to be staged over 5-year increments and to build out the plan over the next 25 years. So starting with what can be done in the short term, between 2023 and 2028, our focus would be on the service improvements that require less infrastructure, but still allow us to increase equity, grow ridership, and set the groundwork for future stages. This includes a pilot express route on Washtenaw Avenue and a minimum 30-minute frequency on all routes during the daytime, including weekends, providing that better off-peak service that I talked about earlier. What we heard from the feedback that we received was that people who are most dependent on transit need it at all times. So we're focusing our service improvements in this stage on providing earlier and later buses while expanding and enhancing night ride. Our regular fixed route service will start to become more accessible as well, which will allow us better integration with A-Ride. The major capital projects that we would start to undertake in this phase phase is upgrading the Ypsilanti Transit Center and the Blake Transit Center. We'd also start in this phase the design work on a new garage and for the implementation of the bus rapid transit and transit priority features. Starting in 2029, the second phase of the plan includes significant increases in service and an expanded bus fleet. We eventually plan to build a full BRT line on Washington Avenue, as I shared earlier, but that's going to take time and to plan and construct. In this phase, we would enhance the express service on Washington with better stops, queue jump lanes, and transit priority features along the route and throughout central Ann Arbor. We'll also introduce an express route on the north-south corridor from Briarwood Mall to the Plymouth Road Park and Ride, and create priority service on the main Plymouth and Packard Ellsworth corridors. Finally, in this stage, we'll also construct the bus garage that we designed in phase one, as well as our first transit hub near Briarwood Mall. From 2023 to 2038, larger improvements will be made to the backbone of the network. So here we'll introduce or build out the full bus rapid transit system on Washington Avenue, a north-south BRT light from Briarwood Mall to the Plymouth Park and Ride, a new express route on I-94, and a priority route on Packard Eisenhower. These upgrades will be coupled with transit priority enhancements across the service area, and also 2 new transit hubs that would be planned and introduced at Carpenter Ellsworth and Jackson Maple. In our last phase, from 2039 to 2045, we would continue to upgrade the backbone of the network so that we can expand our high-frequency network farther across the entire service area. So here, it would include a combination of the full BRT and BRT light on the north-south corridor from Briarwood Mall to Plymouth Park and Ride, as you can see, and a BRT light extension also on here on Jackson, just west of downtown. We'll also build a new transit hub at Nixon Plymouth. And the other key thing we're excited to talk about in this key stage would be that we would expect by this point that the fleet would be 100% zero emissions, creating an efficient, convenient, and clean way to get around this with the service. All right, so that was a lot, I know, to go over in 12 minutes. I just want to spend a few minutes summarizing the key benefits and also talking about the costs to build out this plan. So all of these changes are going to have real measurable benefits for the whole community and not just customers. And that was something that we heard loud and clear last time, was that we really need to talk about the broader community benefits. So our service enhancements will mean more equitable access to high quality transportation for jobs, education, and housing. And that gives more opportunities to those who need it most. More people will be using transit, which will mean more vibrant and walkable communities. And since transit is a more efficient way to move lots of people, our community would require less infrastructure, such as parking, reducing the overall cost burden of transportation services. Fewer cars on the road would also mean less pollution and a healthy environment for everyone. And finally, would also mean reduced traffic congestion for everyone. Connecting this back to the goals that we talked about earlier, our changes are going to result in projected ridership increase of upwards of 150 to 165%. This is thanks to a 39% faster service, the significant increase in off-peak service that I talked about, and dedicated investment for innovation and modernization. We have a 100% increase in service with a 123% increase in service for low opportunity areas. We're reducing transportation emissions by 7 to 11% and an annual reduction in car trips by 6.9 million. It's a lot of trips we're taking off the road. We're also helping businesses by helping workers get to their jobs faster and more reliably through the high frequency transit network. All right, so we don't know the future perfectly, of course, so our plan does give us targets to reach for while allowing us to be flexible as conditions and technologies change. It's important to note that the plan will need to be updated every 5 to 10 years. As the services increase, the cost of providing that service increases too. the day-to-day costs like employee wages, fuel, and bus maintenance, operating costs are paid from local property taxes, state and federal grants, and passenger fares. And so you can see here how our operating costs are expected to grow over the course of the plan. You also see here a summary of the growth in capital costs, which I'll talk about further on the next slide. So let's take a closer look at where the investments will go over the 25-year life of this plan. So this is the focusing in on the capital costs. So we expect to invest about $20 million into innovation and technology, $45 million into new vehicles, $113 million into new facilities, and $175 million on the exciting bus rapid transit system development. But it's important to also flag that a large part of the costs in this plan, $298 million to be exact, are tied to state of good repair and vehicle replacement projects. The funding for these investments will come from a variety of sources. 6% of that will come from existing capital reserves that the ride has. 47% of the funding will come from existing state and federal funding programs that are stable and can be relied on for long-term investments such as this. We also anticipate 31% of the funding will come from discretionary grant programs offered by state and federal partners that are specifically geared towards BRT and state of good repair programs. 16% of the funding sources have not yet been identified. And that does seem like a lot, and it is substantial. But remember that over 25 years, we expect and have had discussions with staff about new and different opportunities that could become available on the municipal, state, and federal level. Overall, we believe this financial plan is achievable, but does also provide flexibility to the ride should any surprises arise along the journey. So that concludes the description, the summary of our plan. I want to thank you for giving me the time. I appreciate that I went a couple minutes over, but at this point, I'll turn it back over to you, and we can go over any questions that you might have. And again, I just want to encourage all of you to provide feedback through any means that you see on the screen, obviously today as well, and then through your networks, if you can share that we do have a survey launched. It's linked on theride.org. And we want to get as much feedback from the community and the public as possible. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Questions and comments? Commissioner Brovin.
Hi, thank you. This was great. I'm super excited to see increased frequency. Very excited to see the idea of like separated bus rapid transit lanes. I have a question that may be outside of the scope of this project, so that's fine if so, but I really like to be able to take my bike on the bus and sort of use that to get me more connectivity. So one thing I was thinking about was whether you had, as part of this, been thinking about how to enable more people to take their bikes. Most of the buses I see currently only have like 2 bike racks, and they're kind of geared towards smaller bikes. So, well, I should say like regular size bikes. And with a lot of people picking up e-bikes, cargo bikes, I just wondered if that was anything that you all had considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Commissioner. And I'll actually let Forrest or Matt talk about in terms of the specifics around bike racks. But what the piece that I would connect to this, though, and call out is, one of the things, the focus areas for us has been around first and last mile connectivity, and recognizing that, for a transit network to be successful, it needs to be adequately and strongly integrated to the community around it. One of the things that we're excited by that obviously we didn't get to talk about here in detail is we've actually built into the planning and to the funding specific dollars to enable the ride to work on developing new ideas and integrations, first and last mile opportunities, whether it is bike racks, whether it is bike share integration, whether it is whatever it is that might come up in 10 years from now that we haven't even thought about. there's going to be sustained funding or dedicated funding within the plan and within the ride to allow them to continuously look at and find new and exciting ways to integrate. Obviously, bike racks is something that we're all familiar with. And I don't know, Matt or Forrest, if you want to talk about the specifics around current plans, but I just wanted to flag that long-term vision around continuously working on first and last mile solutions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yuval. This is Matt, and yeah, I'll chime in. I think Yuval's answer is correct. Within the realm of the current technology we have, you're right. The racks on the front of the bikes only take 2 bikes, and they are, regular size, not the cargo bikes or the tandem bikes. Going forward in the future, there may be new opportunities to do more. Certainly, bike racks and bike lockers are things we can accommodate and expand, and I think that's kind of captured in some of what Forrest said. With current technology and what we have, it's a bit of a trade-off in terms of space. A large bike on the bus is something that's going to bump into someone in a wheelchair, for example. So there are restrictions. You can't bring the bike on the bus. The bike rack on the front, when it's deployed, extends the length of the vehicle, I think 2 or 3 feet. And we're starting to have trouble making some turns in downtown. We did get a request from, I think, the League of Bicyclists before the pandemic to look at larger bike racks. We did explore that. They're probably not going to be feasible simply because of all the maneuvering through downtown that we had to do. But we're going to keep looking at it, like you've all said, until we find a solution that really allows people to do everything they want to do with their bikes.
Yeah, the other idea that we could float that again would tie in well to some of our plans is as we look at building out transit hubs, and even with the upgrades to maybe the transit centers, maybe there's opportunity to build secure parking for bikes or just more dedicated space to leave your bike behind and then connect into the network. And we have a series of transit hubs that we're planning, so it'll give you more places to leave your bike in a secure spot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wanenkoff.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. I wanted to ask more about the expansion of payment options. One thing I've really loved about taking the bus in my hometown of Miami is being able just to pay quickly with Google Pay or Apple Pay on a phone. In what time frame could something like that be implemented? Because I saw that far out, I think, in the 2025 onward slide.
Yeah, so actually one of the things that we were kind of excited by is that the ride actually has been doing some good work in this area around innovating fare payments and looking at solutions. And so they have introduced some fairly modern fare payment options over the past few years. And one of the things that we've sort of focused on through the plan is to continue to innovate that and continue to develop that. And so at each stage, really, there is a new piece, a new element that we're looking at, including, what you alluded to, but then also looking at potentially 10 years out, regional fare integration with the greater, with Detroit, with the greater Detroit area and the greater, So I think there's other elements that we've built into the plan around building the fare collection system out.
I'm just gonna follow on that because the technology exists already, and so I would love to see some movement on that sooner, especially as sort of if we're trying to get people on the bus post-pandemic, making it much easier than it currently is to pay those fares, I think feels really important.
We'll take that away and consider that as a feedback in terms of where priority should be. I appreciate that sentiment. I think it's something we recognize both. Fare collection is one of those things that on its surface can seem simple, but having my background is actually in transit technology, and having lived through some transit fare technology implementations, they can get very messy very quickly. So I think we would all like to see it done sooner, and I think we can have discussions with the ride to see where and which elements can be prioritized and moved quickly on.
Did you have another question, or is your hand just still up? Suzette. Okay. Yeah, it's the Zoom thing. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Boland.
Hi, so I think our next agenda item is about a millage. And so I just wondered where that money fit into the pie chart we just saw. Is that part of the 16% that's unaccounted for, or how does that fit?
So the millage, and Matt can speak to it after. So it is more focused on the operating dollars, whereas the number that you're referring to, the 16%, is related to the capital funds. Okay. And so we talked about it being as how did I phrase it in the presentation? Unaccounted for, but unidentified sources. Sorry, I was just looking for the term. But we've actually had discussions with the RIDE about specific tools that are available. There's a variety of tools that are available, and we've had those discussions. And the reality is, and we didn't want to put it forward at this stage because they're very early thoughts in terms of which would work best and how to best maneuver them. And the reality is that you typically would want and need to have a strong vision, a strong plan in place before you start to go down the path of talking about public-private partnerships, parking fees, multi-use development costs, value capture tax, all of these tools that are available that different regions, different municipalities use, they're available to you, but ultimately you need to have the why first. Why would you go about having those discussions with stakeholders? You first need to have that vision in place. That's different than the millage piece that Matt will talk to you about, which is more focused on the operating dollars and to sustain the service.
Thanks.
I'm curious about the transit center upgrades that are in there. I feel like so often in the US, we have these sort of like humongous transit centers in situations where maybe all we need is a bench and a shelter and a platform. And so I'm curious specifically about those pieces of the plan.
Certainly. And Forrest, do you want to take that?
Sure, I'll take that. So I don't know how much you have heard the affordable housing development just south of the current Blake Transit Center. So that's part of that. As a part of that project, we've been working with the Housing Commission, of course, the city and DDA, and try to, the parking bus off street is a little bit safer and much more easier for customers to transfer between buses. So the idea for the Blake Transit Center upgrade will be just add an extra lane, as part of the new development, and then move some buses from the street parking to off-street loading. So safer for everybody. And then there are also some street furniture or street landscaping improvement along 4th Avenue, and the lane configuration, try to make pedestrian crossing safely and the bus operations safely. So the Ypsilanti Transit Center upgrade, because we operate on street right now, and all buses park on street. So, and the building is really, really small. So we want to expand that and maybe rebuild the whole terminal, either make it an off street or a bigger building. We only have a concept plan at the moment, but next step will be, moving into more detailed design. So the concept will be probably available hopefully soon. And that's kind of the plan we included in this as part of the first stage of implementation.
Thank you. That's super helpful. It would be great to get more buses off of 4th, as I bike through there a lot, and it's a little harrowing being surrounded by buses. So that actually sounds great to me. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right. Well, then I think we can move on to the transit millage, which I think is the same crew.
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll take it from here. Great. Thank you, Yuval, your team. Great job. You're welcome to hang out if you like. So Yuval and his group were speaking about our 25-year plan. I'm here today to talk about the 5-year plan. So, well, I only have a few minutes, and we have a lot of on the agenda yet today. So what I'm going to do is try to introduce a big subject and a proposal. I'll share my screen in a moment, walk you through some material I believe was circulated to you and other viewers of this webcast may find interesting. So you've all mentioned at several points in his presentation sort of the phasing, taking a 25-year plan and turning it into five-year plans. That's not because of any Soviet predisposition for 5-year plans. State law says we can only go for 5-year millages. So that's why that all breaks down. So he mentioned a couple times that the public involvement for the long-range plan, we talked to a lot of people and we asked them, what do you want your transit system to evolve into? Where do you want it to be? And we really heard, and you've all said, a lot of people said transformational change. They wanted the biggest, most aggressive approach to expanding public transportation that was possible. This really lines up with a lot of the policy documents that have come out of City Hall recently. Things like A20, the carbon neutrality plan calls for, vast expanses of public transit ridership and the service to accommodate them, as well as many other things. The city's transportation master plan makes similar aspirations. So our long-range plan is really sort of the blueprint for how we're going to achieve goals like that. And the millage plan that I'm going to speak about now is the first step of implementing that longer vision. As you've all said, people are wanting transformational change. They're willing to pay, but they want it to be clear. What are we getting? And I know that everything you just heard from Yuval, probably like drinking from a fire hose. I'm going to try to break it down into 10 concrete proposals for you this evening. And all I can do is scratch the surface. But what I will do now is share my screen. Please let me know if you can see this, a thumbs up maybe. All right. So this is the document that we circulated to you and is in our board packet this week. This is an initial proposal from me and my staff to our board for their consideration about a millage proposal. Our existing millage is naturally sunsetting soon, and it would be time for us to be proposing a new one anyway. So what I'll do is I'll walk you through this very, very quickly, more as an orientation than a detail. Introductory comments up front, really, I think, focus on the why, as someone said a few moments ago. This proposal is really working to maintain all of the services that we have, expand evening, late night, weekend, and holiday services, introduce an express service between downtown Ann Arbor and downtown Ypsilanti. You may remember you've all just mentioned that in the first stage. I'll say that we've done a really good job with Forrest and his team of making these two things line up. It's really going to be increasing social equity. We have some disparate things going on across our service area between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. We want to resolve them, harmonize our services, bring everyone up to the same level, increase access to jobs, housing, medical, education, and many other types of destinations and opportunities. It's really, the game we're in is not transportation so much as it is access to opportunity. Provide a mobility opportunity for everyone in the community, but particularly folks like seniors, anyone with a mobility limitation, folks who may be low income, but also anyone who wants to just ditch their car. Some of these things like being able to travel late nights, overnight, on the weekend, really geared towards maximizing independence in that regard. Increasing our capacity to deliver major projects. Commissioner Boland asked a minute ago, is the millage operating or capital? And the answer I'm going to tell you in a minute is a little bit of both, mostly operations though. And as I said, a lot of alignment here with many other local plans. I should mention, just as we get going, we have kind of 2 months with our board to discuss this. We'll be discussing it tomorrow evening. I'll make a longer presentation about this, and I encourage everyone who's interested to watch and learn a bit more. And then we'll discuss it, and the board will discuss it again in April before they make a decision. So moving forward, the first attachment really goes through all the proposals. There are 10 separate pieces of this proposal. They're grouped into two main categories: maintaining our existing services and expansion and enhancement opportunities that are out there. This table in many ways is the heart of the proposal, so I'll pause here. It's attempting to do many things, so it does become a complicated table, and I apologize. But essentially, you see on this side the specific proposals that are described in more detail in the following pages. You see the total cost, what percentage of the total package cost that is, the corresponding mill rate. I will say you can't cross-reference these two numbers because there's fares and other subsidies that we're putting into the net millage calculation. You see a cumulative mill rate. It is a mill rate proposal that is larger than our current 0.7, 2.38. I think that's a 1.68 mill increase. As Yuval was saying, there are costs to having expanded transit. We want everyone in the community to go into this with open eyes. And that's something that Forrest and his crew have done very well. I think last fall when we had our 4 scenarios, we also gave you, roughly here's how much it's going to cost, and here's what it would mean in terms of millage. And so we're doing that again here, just so that the community can have a transparent and open conversation about priorities and what we're willing to pay, and hopefully to be clear on what folks are getting. And then final column is implementation start date. So on these two categories, the first one's maintaining existing services. The first 4 items here, renewal, allowance for deficit, allowance for inflation, and additional staff, are really about maintaining what we have and being able to meet the commitments and expectations of this community today. Molly asked about, or perhaps it was Suzette asked about fare collection and could we do more faster? Short answer is, I need more people. I hate to say it, it's just one of those things where everything's possible, but how fast? And so to be able to advance some of the things that the community has asked us to do, we're already kind of maxed out, so some additional staff are going to be necessary. But all that first category is really there just to maintain the existing services that we have. Then in the second category, items 6 through 10, these are like a smorgasbord. Theirs is an optional group, a menu of items that are possible that people could approve, our board could approve, and there's a variety of them. They could be implemented all together or individually. The first, number 5, is that express route between the 2 downtowns. We think this is a great way to actually cut travel time by a third. That doesn't happen very often, so this is a great opportunity for that. Longer hours of operation, that means going later into the evening, system-wide across all communities. Increased frequency of weekend service. This really matters for folks who don't have a car, seniors, persons with disabilities, persons with low income, or people with a car want to ditch their car, because it enables a level of freedom on the weekends that maybe you can't make that spontaneous trip if the bus is only coming every 60 minutes, but if it's coming every half an hour, that becomes much more possible. Expanded overnight service into Ypsilanti and Ypsilanti Township. Ann Arbor has had overnight service for years with our service called Night Ride, but that same service is not available throughout the entire city of Ypsilanti or all of Ypsilanti Township. That's a bit of a problem for us. We think this is an equity issue that we can resolve here. Similarly, item 9, customer service agents at the Ypsilanti Transit Center. If you visit our Blake Transit Center in downtown Ann Arbor, you will be greeted by friendly customer service agents in the building during most hours, happy to sell you a pass, answer your question, take your photo for a bus pass. We don't have any of that at the Ypsilanti terminal. We have the space, we have the counter, but we don't have any people. It's been that way for a very long time, and we don't think that's right. So being able to staff that facility is important. And then finally, number 10, this gets back to Julie's question about major capital projects. This is a set aside to help us save money to do major advancements. Yes, this could include fare collection equipment, but it could also include zero emissions bus technology, bus rapid transit, a new garage, a wide variety of big transformative projects that have very large sticker prices. We're fortunate in the United States that the federal government frequently will help carry 50% of the cost of such large projects, but bus rapid transit, to put it in perspective, could easily cost $80 million for the BRT on Washtenaw. If the feds pick up 40, we got to come up with the other 40. So this proposal is about creating a bit of a nest egg of capital money that we can bank up over the years so that we have local match to bring to that. So the rest of this, so to summarize, this table banks up all of these elements, goes into more detail, tells you how they sum up and break down. The further pages go into more detail about each element of it. I won't go through each one. Final part of this proposal is the timing. We are recommending an August millage in 2022. The reason being that our funding will run out in 2024. 2023 is the last time we can ask the voters, and the laws we're enacted under only allow us to seek referenda once every calendar year. It's quite specific. So 2022 is a good year, but if we should fail in 2022, we need a backup, and that would be 2023. That's the drop dead date to be able to renew this. If we fail at both of them, we could have serious service disruptions as early as 2024. So with that one, Madam Chair, I will stop my screen share so I can see everyone, and I'm happy to answer any questions about this first short-term implementation of a bigger long-term vision.
Thank you. Questions? Comments? I see Commissioner, I think it's not Commissioner Hull, and then Commissioner Balderrama.
Yeah, so I guess one concern I had was that a lot of this stuff isn't very explicit, and you're pushing through with this big millage increase for August. I mean, I think some of the stuff might be worth it, but some of it's not very well defined. Like some of the hours might be fixed route and some might be flex ride. Well, okay, you could improve flex ride, but going from a 4-hour wait to a 2-hour wait isn't going to do much for a lot of people. And I mean, that's like when I've tried flex ride, the waits are just insane. And the other thing is, yeah, I would like to see more text. I feel like it's crucial to have more information for passing this. And the other thing I saw is it says holiday service in the summary, but in the actual description, it says nothing about holiday service. And yeah, so there's that. And the other concern is going so quickly with this August 2022. I'm concerned that you're not going to have time for feedback and getting this better defined. And as far as getting through and convincing people that we need this bigger millage, that I'm wondering why not at least bump to November, or maybe even consider doing one millage for the renewal and one for the additional services, maybe those being in separate years.
Well, there's a lot there. In terms of splitting it into 2 millages, I think we could consider that. That's certainly an option our board could do if they so chose. It's not something I'm prepared to propose, though. November, I'm explicitly recommending August because the November race is going to be very difficult to run in. We have governor's races, control of the U.S. House up for stake, and possibly as many as 12 statewide ballot initiatives targeting for November. That's going to be an enormous ballot. So it's going to be very loud, acrimonious. It's going to be very difficult to reach and educate voters under those circumstances. People with a whole lot more money will be buying out all the Facebook ads. And we will not be able to help people understand what's in our proposal under those circumstances. So we think August is probably a better time. Thank you for the feedback about the holidays thing being missing. That gives me something to double check on this. And with respect to how the hours of service are done and late nights, I'll ask Forrest if he wants to weigh in on this. I think it does have some planning work that needs to be done that would obviously involve the community to help us decide whether it's expanding the fixed route service hours or leaning more on FlexRide. But Forrest, do you want to weigh in on that choice?
Sure. Well, as Matt mentioned, those details need to be going through a public consultation process. Of course, involved a lot more detailed analysis, comparison. At this moment, we, the message we want to do, just expand and making sure the longer service hours for those who need it. How we deliver that, it could be through fixed route or FlexRide or mix of fixed route and FlexRide. So, as Matt mentioned, we can go out, ask, propose options for public feedback, and then we can make a decision after that.
Yeah, I kind of get that, though. Is that going to take place before the millage is on the ballot or after? Because I feel like it's critical to have this all defined before people vote. Because if you're just wanting a blank check, I think it's more likely people are going to vote no. And I feel like that, the pressure to get something out by August might be an argument towards the two millage approach, that renew in August and then do the expansion in 2023 after you have more time to define what's there.
Thank you. We'll take that into consideration. Another option I could suggest to the board, if that one is too ill-defined, we could simply eliminate that option entirely from this millage and move forward without it. So thank you for that. I'll definitely convey that over to our board.
I will say I don't like the idea of eliminating this stuff entirely. I think the night and weekend service is definitely critical as someone who does not drive and as frequently, it's hourly service, and it really does not work well. And service ending at 6 p.m. on Sunday has been a long complaint. And the holidays having absolutely no service, just except for FlexRide, which is frequently, the wait is frequently measured in hours. And I just would like to see this, but I also don't want the millage to fail. And I feel coming up with a tripling of the millage with ill-defined priorities is, I fear, is going to cause it to fail.
Thank you. I'm going to keep moving us along because I know we started late, but I want to try and keep us moving. Commissioner Balderrama.
I wanted to learn a bit more on what type of shelter is moving forward, or what funding is looking like, just because there's been some instances where waiting for the bus in rain, or even when it's too hot or any snow, can be a barrier enough for people to even use these services. So I'm wondering what that will look like for the next 5 years.
Sure. So being able to build a shelter is a capital expense. It's a single lump investment. I haven't checked recently, but I think each shelter can cost anywhere $10,000, just to put that in perspective. So being able, the 10th item on here about building up a capital reserve, some of that could absolutely be used for shelters. We don't have a particular plan or priority for it here, but it is a capital funding limitation. We frequently get requests for shelters, and we try to accommodate as many as we can. They're generally allocated to be blunt, the busiest stops, the places where the most people are waiting most of the time. We probably couldn't afford to put a shelter at every bus stop, especially if they're only used once a day. So we don't have any distinct plan in the millage, but that is definitely one area where we could use those capital funds.
how possible is it to like explicitly define goals for a number of shelters? Because I'm a semi-frequent bus rider and I have yet to actually use a shelter too. And so I'm wondering what kind of like threshold or internal goals that there are being set in order to build more shelters out beyond having people follow up with like emails or phone calls to express interest in it.
We have a long-standing policy with a utilization threshold. We count the number of people who get on, for example, at every bus stop. We don't count the people who get off because when they get off, they don't hang out at the shelter, right? They walk away. We'd be happy to take any specific suggestion for a particular bus stop that anyone thinks maybe should be considered. On occasion, we will make an exception for a low-use bus stop if it's near a senior's home, for example, or a special destination with particular needs that may warrant a shelter. We do have the capacity to make some exceptions, but relatively speaking, it's not something that we've built into this millage proposal at this time, but it's something we could certainly consider.
I'd love to see it at least in the long range planning, if not in the specific millage proposal. I do think it's a real deficit in our system. Also the lack of seating. It's a big accessibility issue. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I'm not seeing other hands, so I just have one question. Oh, well, I'm gonna do my question and then we'll see how we are on time, which is, I'm curious about your plan to avoid the sort of Better Transit Now campaign that's actually an anti-millage campaign. We've had a history in Ann Arbor of some pretty like tough resistance to millages and some successful resistance to millages, and specifically around transit millages. And so this is really ambitious, and I'm curious about how you plan to actually get it through the voters.
So in 2014, we went for the first millage, and there was opposition to that millage. We won 71%. That was the first increase. In 2018, we had our second millage. That was a straight renewal. We won 83%. Every precinct in all three jurisdictions by a sometimes overwhelming amount. So we have, I think, good reason to believe a fair amount of support in the community. But you can't take that for granted. And you're absolutely right that taxes and tax increases are controversial. And the community needs to have a discussion about priorities. And to be direct about it, it's kind of easy when we're making a plan, like the long range plan, for everyone to say, I want everything. Give me the most expensive version of whatever you're selling. When we actually show up with the bill, things kind of get real fast, right? So part of how we have structured this proposal is to account for and be flexible to what we hear from the community over the next several weeks. The way the proposal is structured with 10 different pieces, particularly the service enhancement options. Those options can be approved altogether, or individual ones can be removed. If the board hears a lot of feedback from everybody that says, we love transit, but maybe not that much, they can begin to look hard at some of those and see which ones maybe don't make the cut. That's perfectly acceptable. I've been quite clear with the board that this is a proposal to get the ball rolling, and it's ultimately up to them to make that kind of, I'll say, political decision, and weighing the will of the voters beforehand, I think, is an important part of that. The other part of it is the structure of how this discussion is happening over the next month. We've introduced it this week, and yes, I agree, it is moving quickly. There are some reasons for that. But we have tomorrow night, where we'll be making a more fulsome proposal presentation, and then into April, So we can take comments and feedback. Tonight's just the first. We have numerous presentations scheduled throughout our 3 communities. We can take comments on the millage proposal by phone, by email, verbally. I'm strongly encouraging people to come to our board meeting tomorrow night. And it's one thing to say it to me. I'm just a staff person. I write the proposal. It's the board that has to make the hard decisions from this point on. So if people feel strongly either in favor of transit or elements of this proposal, or that now is maybe not the best time for tax increases, I strongly encourage everyone to come to our board meeting on March the 13th or 17th, excuse me, tomorrow night, and in April 21st, and express your feelings directly to the board. I think that's how we can right size this, if you will, as a ballot initiative, and hopefully present something to the voters that they do want to approve. Ultimately, this entire exercise, from the long-range plan down to this first implementation step, has to go to the voters, and they have to approve it. So it will be them that ultimately decides whether or not they want this vision to come true.
Thanks. And what time is that meeting tomorrow?
Our board meetings start at 6:30 p.m. They are hybrid. You are welcome in person, but you are also welcome virtually. All the information is on our website to join virtually. We're in the downtown Ann Arbor library, and we are open, but I would encourage virtual participation. Everything will look like this on a Zoom.
Great. All right. Thanks so much. I'm going to move us along at this point. I really appreciate your time and the time of the other AAATA staff and consultants. This has been really interesting. So thank you all. And now I'm going to move us on to staff report and updates. And Raymond, we had planned for a longer chunk of time for this, but I wonder if we can perhaps do the short version.
Yes, Madam Chair, I can get through it very quickly. So the monthly update that's included in your packet from staff is relatively short. It's only 2 pages. We're kind of in the doldrums right now from when we identified projects. Last month's list was long, but things haven't started yet. So really, the updates really just include information about project websites. So on the street resurfacing project, you heard from Dave Degman today, that website has been established. South Main, same sort of thing. There's a survey that's open on a project website that's been created. East Medical Center Drive Bridge. The update here is that there is cost estimate for an east-west pathway under the East Medical Center Drive Bridge that's being worked on right now. Lower Town study is now complete. The full report is included in the packet. We had a speaker address that this evening. Some updates on streetlight numbers. Traffic calming, both North Side and Longman Fairview, were approved by council. So those are going to go into construction during the construction season over the summer. American Rescue Plan funding recommendation. Again, the memo that was shared with council was shared with you in your packet as well. But my understanding is council is expected to deliberate on how to allocate those funds in April, not their next meeting, but some meeting, either the first or second meeting in April. And then the last update is the 2022 bike map is now available online. It's not out to print yet, but a PDF version is available online. And we coordinate with the county on dividing up the printing costs. So we're working with them right now on how many they need and how many we need. But hopefully those will get sent to the printer here soon. I did just want to highlight a couple of the other additions that were included in the packet. I already mentioned some of these. The American Rescue Plan Act funding. This is the staff suggestion in terms of how the $24-ish million should be allocated. I would draw your attention to page 8 of the memo. It gives kind of the breakdown of the recommendation funding. From this commission's perspective, there is $2 million identified for Vision Zero plan implementation. So if council, agrees with what the suggestion is, this will be a nice shot in the arm for Vision Zero. We have what I like to call seed money for this current fiscal year, but there isn't dedicated funding moving forward. So this could give us a couple years worth of funding to kind of keep the momentum going towards Vision Zero projects. Lower Town study, again, it's a pretty hefty document. It's 84 pages. There's a lot of technical material in it. You received a report on it late last year, and so we went back to the consultant and kind of finalized the document, and it's now ready. We will be sharing that with City Council as well, and it is posted to the website. And then the last one is a communication from the city to the Federal Railroad Administration related to the Ann Arbor Station. Again, you heard a caller tonight speak to that as well. You know, I don't have any updates beyond what's already in this letter. We're still in discussions with Federal Railroad Administration about how to move the project forward, and we'll be sure to circle back with you. But we fully anticipate there's going to be some public engagement on this project sometime this year. So once we get some direction in terms of what we should be asking, we'll be sure to loop you in on that as well. I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you. That was very fast. Commissioner Robin.
Hi, yeah, I do have a question. I was looking through the Lower Town report, and they refer to some appendices that I don't think are attached currently. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right. What we will do is we'll make sure all the appendices are included on the website, but it just becomes so unwieldy. It probably becomes like a 1,000-page document.
It's a long document. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll be sure to do that.
Thanks.
My recollection is that there were some considerations around, I can't remember if it was bike lanes or sidewalks or some kinds of reconfigurations that were sort of waiting on the Lower Town final report to come out. And I'm wondering, is that going to start moving right away, or is there something that has to happen?
Yeah, now that the study's finalized, and it was just finalized last week, we need to circle back with, and Nick can help me remember this. I think it was on Barton, there was a discussion about removal of on-street parking and the consideration of possible inclusion of bike lanes. So now that the report is done, we'll circle back with the project manager on the project on Barton and see, if there's a timeline to be able to incorporate the recommendations from the plan and carry those forward. Awesome. So it's on our to-do list. Admittedly, we haven't circled the wagons yet on that issue yet.
That's fair. Thanks. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to keep us moving. Thank you for that report. Next up, we're moving on to liaison reports. So any commissioners who serve as liaisons to another body or organization are invited to provide brief reports and updates.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm representing the Commission on Disability Issues. Still, having little trouble finding someone new. I was going to be leaving that commission in May, and yeah, so hoping we can get a new member, but I'm still here for now. And anyway, we had a presentation by a company called Move, M-U-V-E, that's kind of doing a kind of transit-related app that's more of an on-demand service that seems to be targeting rural areas. And I know they're launching in Washtenaw County with some kind of partnership with the Wave. And they didn't necessarily have any details as to where they're offering the service. It sounds like it's more oriented towards Chelsea and Dexter areas, but it does sound, I am kind of intrigued that there's a new on-demand type service that's oriented towards these rural areas, because those are the areas where it's really hard to get transit, and it's also really hard to get Uber and Lyft. And my parents actually live in such an area in Washtenaw County. And so I am curious to see what comes of this Move thing, partnership with Wave, and if they expand out further into other areas. And yeah, so I just thought that might be of somewhat of interest to you, just seeing this presentation. And I guess that's all I'm going to say. I definitely think I saw, like, as far as the alternates, I am curious, does that have to go to City Council too, all our bylaw amendments, or is that passed once we pass it? Because I'm kind of curious as for the Transportation Commission as when they can appoint alternates. And
yeah, my understanding, I think I read either the bylaws or the enabling legislation. It is actually have to go to City Council. But the selection of alternates is a function that's between, you know, the Commission on Disability Issues and whatever for them those won't have to go back. So
yeah,
just have to formalize the process.
I'm just wondering when the bylaw would take effect.
Yeah, admittedly, we'll upload it now that you've taken action on it. We'll upload it for council's consideration, but admittedly, there's a five-week lead time for anything we upload to City Council. So probably the earliest we're looking at is, you know, if I'm lucky, I can get it the second meeting in April, but more likely the first meeting in May.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee.
Thank you. I'll make this pretty brief. The Planning Commission met for the working session on March 8th to talk about parking maximums. And I think that in the beginning of April, we'll see the Unified Development Code revision drafts come forward. So I think that'll be April 5th. The discussion was predominantly about eliminating minimums. And I don't think there's any real controversy about that. And then we had some discussions about the maximums. And we had some citizens putting forth 3 spots per 1,000. There was a good, healthy discussion around that particular topic about what's urban, what's suburban, you kind of know. And a lot of that has to do with parking. So just wanted to say, if you guys want to pay attention to parking, that's coming forth first week of April. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Boland.
So I wasn't sure, do you still want a Vision Zero report, or do you feel like we already covered that?
Is there anything from the meeting itself that that you wanted to share, or was it mostly just getting started?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that there are these 2 components to it. So there's the quick build, and then there's the major streets traffic calming. And the plan is to implement quite a few different quick build designs before July 1st. And so that's really moving fast. At the meeting, we were presented with kind of ideas for what was going to happen. It was very data driven based on where crashes had happened. But with the major traffic calming, the plan is just to build a sort of toolbox that can be used later on. So there won't be any implementation of major traffic calming. And I guess there's no money for it right now, but that's where things are. Yeah, I guess that's all I'll say. Brett can jump in if he has something more to add.
That's a good summary, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I may just add one thing, commissioners may be interested in those specific projects. So if you go to the Vision Zero website, which is a2gov.org/Vision Zero, you can click on the presentation, and I think it's around slide 30 or so. I think I mentioned this in the homework. You might just want to scan through those so you can get an appreciation of, you know, the locations and what some of the treatments are that are being proposed. If we had time, I'm sure we would have gone into more detail today, but we ran out of time, so my apologies.
Maybe next time. Thank you. I think that's all of our liaisons. So now it's time for commission member communications. So all commissioners are invited to provide reports and updates.
I just wanted to let you all know that I communicated with Raymond and Molly, and next month's commission meeting will be my last meeting since I will be completing my program. I'll still be in Ann Arbor, but I also want to just make sure and be like transparent on my availability, and I'll be traveling a lot then shortly after graduating, but wanted to let you all know that I'll be joining you all for April, and then happy to hopefully run into each of you at some point in Ann Arbor over the summer, since most of our interactions have been virtual, but it's been really neat, and I'm sure I'll have more to say next month too.
Thank you so much for your time and your service to the commission, and we will miss you, but we'll get to see you next month. Any other communications? Okay. Any agenda items for next month? And again, this is a chance just to sort of like throw the idea out there when we don't have time to talk about any specifics right now. Some things we've got coming up are budget update, Vision Zero implementation plan update, Main Street reconfiguration, South Division cycle track, which has a survey out right now. That's a relevant communication. There's a survey out right now about expanding the cycle track on South Division, and also carrying over that discussion about council priorities that we didn't end up doing this month. Okay. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 20th at 7 p.m. It will also be a virtual meeting. So if there are no objections, we will adjourn tonight's meeting. I'm not seeing any objections. So this meeting is adjourned. Thanks so much, everyone.
Good night.